in the earth in an hour such as this. You will hear Satan speak because he's only speaking to destroy dominion. God gave dominion to man, and he didn't stop until Jesus Christ restored it. So therefore, God has put man in the earth to have dominion. If that be the case, then I could say this with a sense of certainty that it would be somewhat illegal and against the plan of God then for him to manifest in the earth without a man. Y'all just looking at me. It would be counterproductive for God to choose you and to give you dominion and then work around you. God works with man by choice. He works with man by desire. He works with man by what is in him. And I here to tell you today, there is a time where God has a need. He has a need of a man who will step forward and be. And God has to use us because he would go against his word to do it without a man. It will be illegal. As a matter of fact, my son, who has been married a year, please take your seats. I'm preaching too hard and too fast. My son, who has now been married a little over a year. It's interesting because I too have raised my sons to be virgins before they marry. I went into a covenant with my sons at the age of 11 years old, and there were 7 points that I made with them to establish the fact to them that they are God-fearing men. And we entered into that covenant, and I gave them a gold gift that they wear to this day to remind them of the covenant that they have with their father. So my son, who has now been married a little over a year, about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we were sitting watching television together, and a Rogaine commercial came on. And the Rogaine commercial came on, and you know how when they promote drugs, the thing that they do next is they give you the side effects, the things you have to be careful of. And so one of the side effects for taking Rogaine was hair loss. And so, I mean not hair loss, but impotence. Yeah, that was one of the side effects, impotence. Rogaine helps grows hair, but to take it, you risk being impotent. And so when they said that, I just said out loud, well, I'll just have to be bald-headed. I wasn't even thinking, wasn't even thinking about him. And he looked over at me, he said, Dad, you'd be bald-headed? I said, yeah. I said, one day you'll understand what I'm talking about. He went on his little honeymoon, and he called me from his honeymoon. He said, Daddy, you remember that Rogaine commercial we were watching some years ago? I said, yes, son, I remember. He said, call me cue ball. You can call me Mr. Clean. I said, now you get it, don't you, son? He said, I got it, Dad. But the point that I'm making is he married a girl, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but her father did not, he got caught up in some things and was in prison the majority of her life. And so he was out by the time my son married this young lady. Lord, let me finish this in the next 15 minutes. By the time my son married this beautiful young lady, he walked her down the aisle, he gave his daughter away. He really wasn't there for the raising of this girl. And so he called my son's house, and he wanted to speak with my son. His daughter wouldn't put my son on the phone until she knew what he wanted, and he wouldn't tell her, so she didn't put him on the phone. So he called back and left a message that was very threatening to his daughter. And so when my son heard the message, he called her. Somebody came to me and said, I was talking to so-and-so, and they told me that your son was very disrespectful to him. I said, now, you know my son. I raised my sons to be respectful. They say, yes, sir, no, ma'am. They put titles on names. My sons are very, so he'd never shown you any disrespect. I said, something had to happen that brought him out of trained character. Yes, something had to happen. And so, because the Bible says, and you all may change it, but it don't say what we say it say. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. We had so many children depart until we flipped it and said, it will not depart from him. That ain't the Bible. When you train not just by words, but by deeds. And let me just inject that right there. Because my son, until he found God, only knew God through me. I was the only God that was an example to my son. His only reason he served my God is because I was his God until he knew my God. In other words, I set the standard for my son. You see, you must understand what I'm saying in here today. A son gets his identity, Lord, don't let me be too long. A son gets his identity from his father. He don't know how to be a man if a father doesn't be a man before him. A daughter, she gets what to identify with in a man from her father. If you don't show her what a man should be, she'll gravitate to any kind of man. And a wife has to come under a husband. Now you have to set a standard for her to come under. You can't be low down and expect for her to come under. That's too low. You got to set a standard. And the Bible says you're to love her like Christ loves the church. And so you got to get a standard that's worth coming under. Some of us are so low down, and then we don't understand why our wives don't want to hear nothing we got to say, don't want to follow us nowhere, because you ain't set no standard worth coming under. I just thought I'd throw that in there extra. That wasn't even on my notes. And so I said, something must have happened. And so I called him. I said, what happened? They told me that you were very disrespectful to your father-in-law. He said, well, he called and he threatened my wife. And I also trained my sons not to be violent, except for the fact that their wives are threatened. I'm a very non-violent man. But you ask Pastor Winans, inside joke, let me stop. Yes, I am a non-violent man. But there is a streak of violence that comes over me concerning my wife. I believe if Jesus could whip the money exchanges out of the temple when we had not seen any violence for him, and the church is the bride of Christ, I have every right and responsibility to beat the mess out of you when it comes down to my wife if you have offended her. Now that's just the way I see it. You don't have to take that out of this room. That's just how I see it. And so I put that in my sons. Don't let anybody run over your wives. Don't let anybody take advantage of your wives. And so he said, Daddy, he threatened her. And I wanted to make sure I asked him, sir, I heard this message. Are you telling, am I hearing? He said, yeah, and I'm telling you and anybody else that need to. He said, now wait a minute. Your days for talking like that to her is over. When you walked her down the aisle and gave her to me, now your response to her is through me. And any other access to her is illegal. I'm trying to help you in here. You can't get to her now except to me. And God put you in a place. Yeah. I'm going home now. He put you in a place that in order for him to really do what he wants to do in earth, he has legally set you in place so he himself can operate and manifest the real power of who he is. And so in my conclusion, my brothers, the Bible declares to us, according to Chronicles 16:9, it says, for the eye of the Lord runs and to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on the behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. And so even though God is sovereign, he does what he wants to do. I believe with all my heart today that he's looking for a man. I believe with all my heart today that he needs a man. Y'all don't want to hear me. I think he needs a man, and I think there are certain qualifications that he's looking for. Time won't have me to go into all of them, but one of them, I believe that when we go to our text and find out that Saul had been rejected. As a matter of fact, Saul was chosen at the bequest of the people. It is interesting because when God speaks to them about Saul, he tells them all the things that Saul would do as a taker. Said he will take money, he will take your animals, he will take your virgins, he will take your daughters. He did not have, my God, he did not have the DNA of God in him, because God is not a taker, he is a giver. So you will notice that when God spoke to them, he says, this is the king that has been chosen. In other words, God didn't even take ownership of choosing Saul, but when it got to David, God said, I will find me, or I have provided myself a king. Because David's heart was different than Saul's heart. The people chose Saul, but God provided David for himself. And so there are some attributes, I believe,